Okay, before I start the writing process, I always think it's a good idea to map out what you know about the subject and what you've learned about it. So the very first thing I do in situations like this is just to write down my bias first of all. So on this subject, it's about Adam Goodes and the booing, and I actually do start out from the assumption that it's racist. I think it's good to get that down. So as this is important because as you're taking notes or as you're reading, you need to be aware of that bias so you can challenge it. Okay, so I started off with the first box I drew here is in blue. Everything in blue represents what I already knew about the subject. So here I just wrote down race and football and Goodes, and off that stems things which I knew. So I knew about Goodes as a person, I knew that he was Australian of the Year, I knew that he'd won the Brownlow Medal, Australia's Premier Football Award, for being the best and fairest player, and I've underlined that because people accuse him of being an unfair, dirty player, but in fact he's actually twice been awarded the fairest player in the competition. I also knew a fair bit about theory, that there's a logic of racism in Australia which sort of conceals itself behind the concept of equality, which makes it very difficult to combat. There's a fair bit too that I knew about the black armband view of history, and this all came from my understanding of Aboriginal or Indigenous history and the various things that stem from that. I also had a lot of personal experience of racism directed at Indigenous Australians, having grown up in Perth, where there was a big population there, and how easy it was to buy into that if you're ignorant, as I was when I was a kid. So therefore, I've also identified links here. So why the backlash? Silencing. These things I think were key and what I will probably discuss in the essay. All this stuff in green is stuff that I didn't sort of consciously know before I did it. I may have had some guess about it, but I wasn't completely clear. So in the green, it's what I got from the article as I read, which actually supported my bias. So here we have the information from Charlie King about Goodes' hurt feelings and how this attack on him could be construed actually as an attack on Indigenous Australia as well, or Aboriginal Australians. And then we move on to the red stuff here, which actually is reading from the article, what contradicts my bias? How strong is this evidence? So we have a lot here from Andrew Bolt, that the booing isn't racist, it's just an example of bullying. That it all could be fixed if he just apologised for his overreactive behaviour towards the 13-year-old girl. So these things represent the counter-argument, and after I've mapped it all out here on this mind map, then I'll start to decide, well, what's the strongest evidence and what thesis will I run with in my paragraph, which in this case I did decide that the evidence on this side seemed to be easier to support for me anyway. There was more of it, and it was more based in theory rather than I thought, a bit weaker just based on opinion.